How's it going, everybody? My name is Rejnols, and today we're talking about the Dataslate that is coming in 2 days. In other words, it's a Dataslate prediction. Why am I making a video about a Dataslate that's 2 days out? Well, because it's fun, and I also just want to talk a little bit about the meta in 40k today, and what I think you can expect happening when this Dataslate is out. So first of all, if you don't know, the Dataslate is releasing on Thursday, otherwise known as September 7th? 7th? If you haven't noticed, it's been a long time since I've recorded myself in front of a camera, because as you also might notice from the location, I moved into a new apartment, I started my internship, there's been a lot of things happening, so bear with me if I'm not quite used to sitting in front of a camera and recording. In any case, you didn't come from any of that, you came to hear about the Dataslate. So yeah, it's coming out on Thursday, 2 days from when I'm recording this. And if you're new to 40k or just don't really keep up with 40k, then a Dataslate, what is it? Well, it's kind of like the 40k version of a video game patch. You'll have updates to dominant factions as well as buffs to underperforming factions. And as something completely new in 10th edition, they are looking to change up how often they're doing the updates, or rather not how often, but how often a certain update is coming compared to in 9th edition. So in 10th edition, they first and foremost want to be touching on the points cost of units rather than the rules. In 9th edition, it was the opposite. It was every 3 months you'd have an update for the rules of a faction, and then every 6 months you'd have an update for the points cost. Now I say every faction, but in fact it's not always every faction. But since we are in a completely new meta space with 10th edition being out for now about, 3 months? I think it's fair to say you're gonna see a little bit of changes to every single faction in the game. There might be a few that go completely unnoticed, but in general, everything needs a little bit of tune-up here and there. We'll just have to wait and see how much they do, but you can expect that the top-performing armies as well as the bottom-performing armies are gonna see quite a few changes. Right, so as I said, they want to work on buffs and nerfs via points first and then rules after. What you can expect, as I mentioned, is a nerf to a certain few overperforming factions. Most likely, Eldar and Genestealer cults are on the top of this list. Both of these armies are consistently in the 60+% win rate at tournaments, and so those are definitely gonna get tuned. And when you're looking at buffs, you're probably looking at something like Grey Knights, Admech, Leagues of Votann, as well as Death Guard. All of those have been underperforming ever since 10th edition released, so expect a lot of changes to those factions in particular, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of change to every single faction in the game. Alright, that was the general gist of what the Dataslate is and what you can expect from it. However, I am mostly focused on Custodes for now, and so we're going to be talking about the Golden Boys and what you can expect to happen when the Dataslate is out. Currently, Custodes is in a place where they look like they have a fair win rate. This screenshot you're seeing on right now is from the Stat Check Meta Dashboard, I think it's called, but I'm not 100% sure. In any case, it tracks every tournament that is GT sized and compiles the data with matchups, win rates, etc., etc. So what you're looking at right now is Custodes against every single faction in the game. And as I was saying, when you look at every single faction in the game compared to Custodes, it looks like we have a fair win rate. Now, what is defined as a fair win rate is somewhere between 45 and 55% win rate. That is like the golden balance that GW is trying to hit. Hey, golden balance, golden boys, I just realized that. I am funny. But in any case, they're trying to make a game where every army falls between these lines. Now, you might say that a 45% win rate is really bad, but you also gotta remember there's 28 factions in the game, and if you start counting Space Marines, it gets crazy. In any case, they're trying to hit 45 to 55% win rate, and Custodes are just below that line at 54%. However, I have noticed that there seems to be a clear misinterpretation of when something is too good. Because Custodes exist in a world where we have Eldar, Genestealer cults, as well as Deathwatch, which are all very high-performing factions. And in that world, they still sit at 54% win rate. So this is the same image as before, but I've just filled up the screen so you can better take a look at it. And if you look over at the first red block, you will notice that the Adeptus Custodes has a pathetic 29% win rate against Eldari. Now, to be honest, Eldari just beats everything. Or at least they tend to do it when it's a skill matchup. Because Eldari just have so many good units, so many good rules, and it's just too much for Custodes to overcome. However, this is the case for most factions playing against Eldari. Another outlier is the Adeptus Custodes versus Genestealer cults. Once again, Genestealer cults are doing very well in the metagame at the moment, and we have a 35% win rate against those boys. Not shown here on any of the blocks because it's a fairly niche faction, despite it being, probably the best version of Space Marines available at the moment. We also have a negative win rate against Deathwatch. The number is escaping me right now, but I believe it's like 42%, something like that. So not quite as bad as Eldar and Genestealer cults, but still on the bad side if we're looking at the 45 to 55% win rate bracket. You will, however, notice that a lot of these blocks also display Custodes at a more than 55% win rate against a lot of factions. Chaos Knights, 68%, Space Marines, 64%, Necrons, 56%, Dark Angels, 61%, Tau Empire, 61%, and to be clear, this is the case for a lot of factions against Custodes. But once again, Custodes only have a 54% win rate, so what is wrong with these numbers? Well, let's take a look at these numbers once again when I remove Eldar, Genestealer cults, as well as Deathwatch. We are now looking at a 60% win rate for Custodes. So if we're about to enter a world where Eldar and Genestealer cults are gonna get kicked all the way down the stairs, that's not a sentence that makes sense, but if they're getting nerfed a lot, then Custodes all of a sudden is sitting very pretty at the top. 60% win rate against, well, we removed 3 factions and there's 28 factions in the game, so a 60% win rate against 25 factions in 40k is absolutely nuts. And this is where I'm calling out all of those people who are like, oh, Custodes doesn't need to be nerfed, they're doing fine, because they don't win against Eldar and GSC and Deathwatch, and yeah, no we don't, but no one does. However, Custodes are beating everybody else. Here's another fun fact for you. After removing Eldar, Genestealer cults, and Deathwatch, there are nothing that makes Custodes have a negative win rate. The lowest win rates we have once we remove those 3 factions are against Thousand Sons at 51% and Tyranids at 50%. If you can't keep up what I'm trying to say, I'm basically telling you that in a world where you don't include Eldar and GSC, and to a lesser degree Deathwatch, Custodes are dominating. So in fact, if you are one of those that are like, Custodes don't need nerfs, they can't beat Eldar, you're wrong. You're right, they might not on average be able to beat Eldar, but they are beating everything else way above average. Okay, so here are my thoughts. Custodes are getting nerfed. There is no way around it, and if you don't think Custodes should be nerfed, I don't know what to tell you. I've shown you the data. I think I've made my point quite clear. Custodes are really, really good if you exclude the absolute top performers. And obviously the top performers are still going to be existing. Whether they get nerfed a lot or a little, we don't know yet. That's not my point. Custodes aren't in a fine spot because they're being held down by Eldar and GSC, because everyone is being held down by Eldar and GSC. So as I've written up here, I'm sorry to call you out, but you're either ignorant or very biased towards your Custodes army if you don't think Custodes should be nerfed. Now, the worst offenders in the Custodes index are the Custodian Guard. They are one of, if not the best infantry in the entire game. Even without an HQ leading them, they have incredibly powerful rules, they have a ton of attacks, they are tough to take down, and you can bring them in squads of 10. That is, in theory, 50 attacks at strength 7, AP 2, damage 2, with either sustained hits, lethal hits, or hey, even both if you bring a shield captain. On top of that, they get wound rerolls of 1s all the time, and if you're on an objective, which you will be doing most of the time if you're playing Custodes, you get full wound rerolls. Oh, but you need to control the objective first. Well, you know what? Bring 1 Vexilla, and now your 10-man squad of Custodes have OC 30. When are you not controlling that objective? I don't know. Now, if melee was the only thing they could do, at least you could make an argument that that's fine. They're very strong in melee, take them down from range. And that is what we're seeing in the current metagame. No one want to engage with Custodes, but that's also an issue, because if no one want to engage in melee with Custodes, that means that melee from the Custodes are too damn good. Granted, this might be, of course, because of our stratagems rather than our offensive profile. In any case, it doesn't stop there, because Custodian Guards are actually also quite good at shooting. the wound rerolls are not limited to melee attacks. So even your shooting becomes quite efficient because you're hitting on 2s. Now you might be wounding on 4s or 5s depending on what you're shooting against, but you have 20 shots. Oh, and wait, once per game you can shoot twice, so potentially 40 shots with full wound rerolls at 24-inch range. And did I mention you can advance and shoot as well? Custodian Guard is just so clearly the best unit in the Custodes book, it's not even funny. Alright, that is the worst offender. However, we also have Wardens. Wardens have the same shooting and the same melee output as Custodian Guards, but they lose access to the wound rerolls. Where they lose access to the wound rerolls, however, they get access to some very good rules that lets them stay on an objective basically indefinitely unless super focused fired. If a character is leading the unit, they have -1 to be wounded, and once per game they have a 4-up Feel No Pain. Now that 4-up Feel No Pain is on top of having a 2-up armor save, being toughness 6, and having a 4-up invulnerable save. You need some serious anti-tank shooting to get through these guys. Oh, and if you're thinking, oh, I have mortal wounds, well, I mean, the Feel No Pain takes care of that. But even if you don't pop the Feel No Pain, Custodes have a built-in 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. I think 4-up against mortal wounds is not too bad, but then you also have -1 to wound, and a 4-up Feel No Pain against normal damage. And then all of a sudden, it starts becoming a little bit silly at how hard it is to remove this one unit. Then finally, we have our HQs, specifically Shield Captains, Blade Champions, and Trajan, which are all S-tier choices. They provide CP, they provide combat power, they provide mobility, they provide flexibility, they just do everything, and they're very cheap. So in general, you could look at Custodes and say their infantry is too damn good. But what about Forge World? Because Forge World is normally like the biggest part of playing Custodes, because Custodes have a very small plastic line, and then a very large, or at least equally large, Forge World line. And normally Forge World is really good. And in 10th edition, only like really the Caladius Graph Tank is a good choice. So as I am hoping, and be clear, I want Custodes to be nerfed, because right now it's just a little bit silly. I can't really play against another melee army like World Eaters without accidentally just killing everything I come into contact with, and they just don't really kill me. So while I want nerfs to Custodian Guard, Wardens, and maybe HQs, I also hope that they're going to be bringing up some of the Forge World datasheets that are just not performing at all. Sagittarum, Venatari, and Dreadnoughts are all really in a state, because why would you ever choose to use any of these over just bringing Custodian Guard or Wardens? So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping the nerfs are targeting the infantry of the plastic line, and then if we see any compensation buffs, which I doubt because GW doesn't usually bring something down and then buff something else. But if it happens, I'm hoping we will see some adjustments to Sagittarum and Venatari and the Dreadnoughts. Alright, we talked a lot about why I think Custodes needs to be nerfed. Let's talk about my actual predictions. And as I just mentioned, my prediction is it's just going to be nerfs. We're not going to see any buffs or rule changes to underperforming units. We're just going to see the top units being nerfed. And you know what? It sucks because a lot of us have a varied collection of units we want to use. And unfortunately, that kind of means that if it is just nerfs and no buffs, the Custodes meta is just going to be the exact same, but we'll have less points. And that is my prediction. I am guessing we are losing roughly 10% of our army, which means that what a 2,000 point army is today will be a 2,200 point army when the Dataslate comes out. My logic here being that Custodian infantry is simply too good at the points cost they are right now. Also keeping in mind that GW has said that they want to change points cost first and then rules later, if need be. So, I'm thinking Custodian Guards, Wardens, and maybe Alaris are going up with 5 points per model. This would bring Custodian Guards to 50 points per model, Wardens to 55 points per model, and Alaris to 70 points per model. On top of that, I'm thinking most of our HQ choices going up 10 to 15 points per model. This might actually be 15 to 25 points per model. And then of course, Agents of the Imperium, such as the Exaction Squad and the Calidus? Whatever it's called. The assassin that vex an enemy stratagem. They're probably all going to be nerfed as well. And with those in mind, I'm looking at, roughly a 10% increase in points. However, if they decide that points are not enough to change Custodes into a fair faction, which rules do I think they would change? First and foremost, I think the fight first ability that we have that basically makes every melee matchup just an auto win might be changed to just become another source of interrupt. Currently, you have counter offensive for 2 command points. I could imagine they decide to make the fight first just another interrupt version, but maybe for 1 command point. But they could also leave it as is and maybe change it to be once per unit or once per game even. We don't quite know. But if they were changing a rule, I think this is what they would target first, because it's a very oppressive rule if you're playing against a melee army that they charge you and then you just get to punch them first. And guess what? Most things do not survive contact with 10 custodian guards. An alternative thing they could do is the unit size of guards. Currently you can take 4, 5, 9 or 10 custodian guards. They might change that to simply be 5 as the maximum size. This would help deal with the previously mentioned fight first ability, because you don't get quite as much value out of it because you're not guaranteed in the same way to kill whatever charges into you. And then finally, they could change the wound reroll rule. This could be done in a number of ways. It could simply be that they don't get reroll the entire wound roll. Maybe it only works on melee attacks, so they lose that extra bit of shooting power that sometimes matters. They could do a lot of things, but those are like the general rules that I would probably be changing. When it comes to the Custodian Guard, when it comes to the Wardens, I think giving them a 5-up feel no pain instead of a 4-up feel no pain might be fine, but it might also completely kill the unit. I'm a bit unsure about that one. Alright, so those are my predictions. However, I also have my wish list, which is things I'm hoping to see change, but will probably not happen. Let's bring up Forge World. As much as I hate saying I want Forge World to be like part of the game, because Forge World is crap quality for way too much money, I do want to see Custodes have more options than, you know, the Alaris, the HQs, the Guards, the Wardens, and the Caladius tank, which is basically our options at the moment. So first of all, Sagittarum, they're just inferior to Custodian Guards in every way. They get +1 strength and +1 shot on their shooting profile, and then their melee is terrible compared to the Custodian Guard. They don't have wound rerolls, they cannot shoot twice. Everything about them just screams that they should not cost the same as Custodian Guards, which in fact, they don't, now that I think about it. They don't cost the same, they cost 5 points more. And that's just stupid, let's be real, that's just stupid. Venatari actually have really good rules. Free rapid ingress, a lot of movement, lands on their melee weapon, but they cost almost the same as 2 normal Custodian Guards for 1 Venatari. And I think movement being priced higher is completely fine, but once again, we're just at a point where it's like, why would I ever consider taking 3 Venatari when for the same price I could get a full squad of Custodian Guards? It just doesn't make sense. Finally, we have the Galatas and the Achilles Dreadnought, and honestly also the Contemptor Dreadnought. That one is not from Forge World. In any case, they're just not worth it, because once again, they compare so terribly to Custodian Guards. Yes, they can punch a little bit harder, but they only have 5 attacks in melee, just like 1 Custodian Guard has. And they're price costed anywhere between 2.5 Custodian Guards, all the way up to 4 Custodian Guards. And at that point, you're just looking at like, I can either have 5 attacks that are slightly better at wounding, or I can have 20 attacks that are probably, on average, the same amount of wounding, because I just have way more dice. But I also get support from shield captains, stratagems, etc., etc. It just doesn't make sense to bring a Dreadnought. So those are the things that I hope they bring up. I think that the Virtus Praetors, the jet bikes, are kind of paying the price of being very good last edition. Even though Custodes last edition kind of ended on, you know, Warden spam, they were still very good throughout the entire edition when Custodes got their codex. So I think it's unlikely we will see any changes to the bikes, but obviously bikes are way overcosted for what they do. So I'd be happy to see a buff to the Virtus Praetors as well, but I'm not expecting it. Alright, that is my rant over, as well as my predictions and wish list for the Dataslate coming this Thursday. What do you want to see changed for the Custodes, or just the metagame as a whole? Let me know in the comments below, or feel free to join the Discord. Thank you so much for watching, and until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful time.